you.
And if there's anything that needs to be handed to the board, those items need to be brought to our board clerk, Carrie Hampson, who's sitting right back here. We do have a couple of public inputs tonight. One was an email in to our board clerk that is going to be read. And then afterwards, we've got a Zoom call. You want to do that on a second? Is that okay with you guys?
That's fine.
And then we've got two people here that would like to speak to the board. So we'll start with Mary.
Development has happened in school schedule changes to the building this year. I was wondering if school week next year. We basically did a 4-day week the entire year at 4 days. More time to work on assignments, study for tests, and exposure, time for doing it. More and more students specifically get what I positive results. I can't believe this is going to be that all day Tuesday. And it shows that 15 people I hate to do the best of parents have already made adjustments to the work schedule that it is the perfect year to switch schedule. Please take all these things into consideration and help these kids succeed.
Thank you, Mary, for reading that. And thank you, did you say Nicole? Thank you for Nicole to write that into the board. Also, we have somebody joining us via Zoom. Are we able to pull them up?
So I don't get an email from that is,
Yes, Robin Warren.
I do not have him waiting to join.
Okay, we'll skip that one and we'll come back to it and see if he's on the end. So the people who are here, the first person that I have is Maddie. When you come up to speak to the board, to speak into the microphone, you need to state the name and address of the board first. Write that down. My name is D93. Can you?
There's nobody on this. I can't hear you on that Zoom meeting.
Okay.
The sound's not working for him.
okay to go ahead.
Okay. And maybe not focus on your issue as much as we did ours. We are talking about your issue tonight, it's on the agenda. So I think you probably maybe know that because it's like a big thing in the community right now. Everybody knows we're talking about this tonight, so. Okay. So we're gonna go ahead and close the public input portion of our meeting and move on. We are going to hear our construction report from John Penn.
Good evening. Excited to report that construction of Black Canyon Middle School is proceeding on schedule. In recent weeks, they have been installing the carpet in the classrooms, and the majority of that work is done. I think we've only got, I believe, 3 classrooms that remain in the building left to be carpeted. They've been polishing the concrete in the commons and the hallways. They're getting very close to the completion of that work. The painting throughout the building is almost finished. It's got a little bit left, it's a touch up. In the gymnasium, they have got the gym to the point where they can start to install the bleachers. And once the bleachers are installed, then they'll put the final coats of finish and paint on the gym floor. They're just to the point where they will start to install the track on the upper deck of the gymnasium. We're really seeing a lot of progress, and we're still feeling very good about the end of April for completion of the building. As far as the budget of the project, we still feel good about that. We have been able to, through the course of the project, we have been able to add 2 additional classrooms in the pods, and we have now been able to go ahead and ask Headwaters to finish the special ed spaces that we had originally hoped for, but felt like budget constraints were not going to allow. But as Headwaters has worked through this with the contingency funds that are remaining, feel very confident we can finish those spaces as well. And the goal is to have those spaces finished at the end of April as well. Mr. Miller and I have been working on FF&E, just coming to where we're winding up the furniture order, and so things are proceeding, I think, really well. Any questions from the board regarding progress?
Just a comment, John, I'm happy to hear that we're on budget, because what I'm hearing in our community is prices are going up. And homes and other buildings that were built 6 months to a year ago are way up.
We have been really fortunate through the progress of the building. One of the things that our architects promised us is they're exceptionally good at knowing how and where to spend the money, so that you get a very, very nice looking building. And it's got a little chutzpah to it, but at the same time, they have been exceptional at controlling costs and keeping us on task in that regard. So I feel very fortunate.
Good to hear.
Make that happen.
You said it, but I missed it just a little bit, extra work with the contingencies allowing us to do. Remind me what that again, or?
Okay, so within the project, we have a couple of the district kept a contingency, and ours was in case the county asked us to do certain things. One of the things we anticipated that was to be a major cost, they did not require us to do. That really gave us, the feeling that we could add some of that extra space. And then Headwaters Construction builds in a contingency to help them deal with subs, any change orders that need to be made through the process. And the project has gone so smoothly that as I have been negotiating with them, you know, how to use that contingency moving forward, they felt like there were adequate funds to finish out that special ed space. And so that's what we've chosen to do with those funds.
We're going to come from both sources.
Yes.
And then the other piece that we got the special ed.
Yes.
But then you said there were 2 classrooms.
Yes, so when we originally bid out the building, we thought we would have to leave out a classroom on each story in one of the pods because of the initial pricing that we were getting. One of the advantages of the delivery system we're using is even after we receive bids, we're able to go back and work with these subs, seek ways to drive the cost of their bid down by seeking, you know, a different material or another way to approach the project. And we have been very successful in doing what looked like we might be a little bit over budget initially, to where we not only came on budget, but were able to move under budget and give us some room to add those 2 classrooms back in the project, and now the special ed space as well.
So John, with those, I guess, extras that we were able to put in the project, what is our total capacity for the school?
So the total capacity of the school, we're anticipating about 850 as it's built. And then, of course, the design would allow us to add an additional 10 classrooms if at some future date we get to the point where we need to, you know, get as high as 1,000 students in the school. So we can very comfortably put 850 students in the school to begin.
We could just add another pod, maybe on top and the bottom.
Yes, correct.
5 up and 5 down.
Wouldn't that get closer to 1,100 or not in the last one? 10 classrooms would be, you figure 20?
Yes, I mean, it would actually be, you know, really close to 1,100.
Okay.
Yeah.
We appreciate the report. Good to hear good news.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. All right, we're going to turn the time over to Dr. Wilson again to talk about our graduation rates.
It's not an awkward pause, it's just a pause. It's not that awkward. So I can't see it already.
So the state has just released preliminary graduation rates. So these are still not on the official state website, which is idleschools.org, that shows a school-by-school comparison of graduation rates. But they did send this to us last week as preliminary numbers for the graduating class of 2020. So the first slide is showing just the numbers per school. The number of graduates are in the dark blue, and then the non-graduates are in the light blue. And as we talked about with our school improvement plan, it's just really important to understand that non-graduates is not the same as dropouts. And there are key individuals in those non-graduate rates that we would not consider dropouts. So for example, a moment ago, I talked about the flight program, which is a program for students who are in special education between the ages of 18 and 21 who have completed their regular high school graduation requirements. And those students do not count as graduates, but they, so that's one specific demographic that's not considered. Other students, again, special education students, if through the course of their individual education plan, we've had to modify their graduation requirements, they also do not count as graduate rate. So It's a federal definition that we're required to use, and it's just to be really important. When we talk about graduation rates, we also think about really what is our dropout rate in the schools, which is a bit challenging to figure. Where do you start that dropout? Is it when they start in 9th grade? There's just all those challenges. And kind of to that point, Lincoln always has the lowest graduation rate, and part of that is because they're the last place kids go before they don't graduate. And so as kids get behind at Bonneville or Hillcrest, and they go to Lincoln as a last ditch effort, if they don't graduate on time, then they're not showing those numbers. If they go to Lincoln and they're not successful, then Lincoln gets the credit for them not being a graduate from that school. So those teachers do a tremendous job, and it's just one of those kind of uphill battles for them, that any student that enrolls in that school, if they don't graduate on time, it counts against their graduation, right? So the next slide shows our past 4 years of graduation trends. And you can see, for the most part, we trended upward last year. Our traditional high schools had a little bit less of an uptick, but our other schools had pretty significant growth between 2019 and 2020. And you remember, because of the pandemic, we did make some pretty significant changes to things. So we did, for example, adopt the state graduation requirements as the minimum to graduate from our high schools. And I wouldn't say it made a significant difference in the overall rate of our traditional high schools, but it made a huge difference for 2 or 3 kids that otherwise wouldn't have graduated. So I'm just grateful for the support that we had from our school board that let those kids stay in their home schools and still graduate, even though they were just meeting the state graduation requirements and not the expanded graduation requirements we have in the district. I just put this together pretty late last night, so I haven't had a chance today to visit with any of the high school principals on why they feel like their numbers trended upward. How many stuff? Corey, is Corey here? Oh, Corey's on Zoom. So Corey Telford is on Zoom. We see a pretty significant increase from 2019 to 2020 for Bonneville Online in orange, and then again a pretty significant increase for Lincoln High School as well. So I don't think I can speak to the whys behind any of those numbers, but it's great to see those upward trends. Any questions from the board there?
Percentage of graduates, right?
Yeah, so this is the graduation rate. Yeah, so what basically the definition is for students who they're put into a cohort when they're in 9th grade, and basically if they stay in our system all the way through graduate, then they count. If they transfer to another school, and we have record that they transfer to another school, then they don't count against us. If they transfer to another school and we can't verify that, then they do count against us, is really the simplest way to talk about it. Foreign exchange students are not supposed to count against us. Sometimes just through the transmission of data, our principals are continuing to appeal those students to the state, and sometimes they're successful and sometimes they're not. I can't speak as to why sometimes those get denied, but there's lots of different variables that go into these calculations. Yeah, so Corey, sure. Well, you got to be brief though, buddy. We got a long agenda tonight, so
I'll be quick, I promise. So one of the reasons why our graduation rate has increased is before they were counting students that came to us from BHC were counting against us in our graduation rate. And so we had to work with the State Department on getting those students that were not we provide the educational services, but they were counting against us. So that was part of the problem. And then they've allowed us to do a homeschool exemption form that's helped Lincoln and I significantly in getting our graduation rates up. So when we have students that choose to go homeschool, which is part of our population. So that's been the 2 main factors that have increased our graduation rate at Bonneville Online.
Thanks, Corey. That's super helpful. And then I think the last slide I just wanted to share is our percentage of non-graduates by ethnicity. And you'll you'll see is that our students who are not white, we have twice the rate of non-graduates among those students than white students. And so something that's critical for us to be aware of, conversations that we need to have as with administrators on what can we do to better support those students.
That's great data to have.
The one piece I did bring in back to this is the state rate, and our district rate was significantly higher than the state rate on graduates. So.
And it makes you wonder on the Lincoln High School as well, if that is because we, during the pandemic, gave the leeway to do the state graduation requirements with those severe.
Not for Lincoln, because they've always had the state requirements. That's one of the benefits that has historically been there for Lincoln students.
So that wouldn't account
Yeah,
for that.
so it wouldn't account for that. It would have made, again, a bit of a difference, but when we have 350 graduates, 350 graduates from traditional high schools, that really truly benefited maybe one or two, so it's not going to see a real significant increase, but certainly, like I said, it made all the difference for those individuals.
Well, that's good. I'm glad it made a difference for some of those kids. We have questions from board members, comments? Are we good, Scott?
Yeah, that's great for me.
Appreciate the report, Scott. That's awesome. So thanks for sharing that. Gordon Howard, we are going to have Gordon talk to us about the school zone flashing lights.
Good evening. Well, it's good to have some good news. So I know we've had discussion in some of our previous board meetings. We've had patron concerns. We've had concerns about the signage out there on the road for the school zones. And so working jointly with Bonneville County, they've been great to work with. We have school zone flashing, school zone signs have been installed. We replaced the 6 existing signs out there, so we didn't place any new ones, but the ones that were currently there. If you remember what they were like in the past, they had on the bottom was just a little strip that said school zone hours. It was very small and kind of hard to read. So what we're able to do with these signs is they're programmable. So I can say the program them for our school calendar. So if we're at a school on a day, they don't flash. If there were days, if we went, so like we used to have our Wednesday early release, we could do a different time for those days. So it's been a real big thing. So currently, in conjunction with the Bonneville County Sheriff's Department, Brian Lovell and I discussed it, and with law enforcement, we've got those flashing lights turned on from 7 to 9 in the morning, and then they shut off and they come in on at 2 to 4:30 in the afternoon. And that seems to be working really well. There's the traffic in the middle of the day on Iona is very minimal compared to the evening traffic and the morning traffic. And by 4:30, by that time, all the students are gone, and the concern there of the school zone is not like it was during the day. So it's been good. Like I said, Bonneville County's been really good to work with us. We did split costs on that, and happy to do that to get that out there. So anyway, it was a good project. We're happy to see that done.
I'm glad we got that done. Thank you for reporting on that, Gordon. All right, Ken Marlowe. There's Ken. I couldn't see you right there.
Chairman Landers and the school board, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all for a few minutes. I'll try to speak into it and still see the screen. I'd like to start by kind of sharing with you a conversation that I had earlier this year with one of our local mental health providers, Dr. John Landers, who may be a very familiar person to some of us in the school system. But he is a school, or not a school secretary, but a psychologist in the community and helps provide mental health care for a lot of our community. And he shared some staggering statistics with me that I would like to share with you.
Give me 2 seconds to show this over.
So in 2017, there was some research conducted regarding students and mental health statistics.
This way, it's where you're pointing.
Oh, point it this way.
I'll just click through for you.
Okay. So the next slide will show a map of the United States and where Idaho ranks. Okay, so we see here, that it's shaded in different colors based on the intensity. So when we look at the percentages of high school students who felt sad or hopeless, Idaho ranked at one of the top states. So between 33 and 40% of students felt that way. When looking at the percentage of high school students who seriously considered attempting suicide, again, Idaho ranked near the top. We were between 19 and 23% of our students considered that. The percentage of high school students who made a plan about how they would attempt suicide, again, sadly, one of the top states, between 15 and 26% of students. The percentage of high school students who actually attempted suicide, not quite one of the top, but still significant, between 9 and 10%. 9 to 10 students out of 100. Percentage of high school students who had a suicide attempt that resulted in an injury, poisoning, or overdose that had to be treated by a doctor or a nurse, again, one of the higher states, between 3 and 4%. Significant attempts. Let me share a few more statistics that Dr. Lander shared with me, that 33 to 40% of high school students have experienced depression within the past year. Between 19 and 23% of students, high school students, had seriously considered attempting suicide within the past year. Between 15 and 26% of high school students have made a plan on how to carry out or would attempt suicide in the past year. Between 9 and 10% of high school students have attempted suicide in the past year, and between 3 and 4% of high school students have required treatment. Those statistics become very personal and very close to home when we look at just our local community. This past week, we had a secondary administrative meeting where we were talking about the mental health of our students and the concern that our high school principals have for their student body population. And this is extended to middle and elementary schools as well, but the high school students, one high school alone, in the past 2 weeks, has at least 6 students who have been hospitalized at our local psychiatric hospital. 6 students in 2 weeks. It's amazing. Sad. In a conversation that I had with my wife, who is a psychiatric nurse and works for the Behavioral Health Center here in town, their division, which takes in all HCA hospitals in Utah, Idaho, and Alaska, they didn't have one available bed in 3 states to treat or care for an adolescent. There's a waiting list. We have children that are being basically cared for in emergency rooms, in other units of hospitals, just waiting for bed. That's a travesty. But it gives an indication of how important attending to the mental health of our students is. So there's a term that we use frequently, and especially in the last several years, called social and emotional learning, where we can attend to those specific mental health needs. We are fortunate that it has become a part of our district's mission and vision and becomes a foundational block in what we're providing as far as that social emotional learning in the process of learning to read, write, conduct math, those kinds of things. And so when you look at it, you can see right here, the district starts with a foundational piece of all students must feel safe, connected, and cared for. And so in that process, we're working on creating a structure in which we can do that more systematically and effectively, so that it becomes kind of a tier 1 intervention, something that every child gets to help, has that opportunity to develop and have that reinforced. So when we look at the four cornerstones of the district's foundation, we look at integrity, teamwork, positivity, learning, and literacy. And for that learning to take place, I think we all recognize and have talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Feeling cared for, safe, those are primary needs. And we can't do higher order operations until those things are met first. And so designing success for every student includes building their confidence through knowing that you matter, feeling safe, believing that you can, sharing your talents fearlessly, and persisting through tough challenges. And that's something that we see a real deficit at oftentimes, that difficult things, children struggle to fight through that and to gain momentum and confidence. And so attending to some of those needs is going to be critical. So what is social emotional learning? There is an organization out there, CASEL, which stands for Collaborative and Academic Social and Emotional Learning. And they are not peddling or selling anything, but what they have done is taken research and compiled and kind of teased out all the important components to what an effective social and emotional learning system is like, and where kids tend to, I guess, flourish, I guess, for lack of a better word. But social emotional learning is the process through which all young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities, manage their emotions, achieve personal and collective goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain support relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. I know that's a lot, and it goes on to talk about it a little bit more. But giving those students that foundational piece of being able to interact with one another and foster those strong relationships, that's critical. So the benefits, if we had such a thing in our district and could see it, what would the benefits of that be? Well, decades of research, and we're talking over 20 years of research that CASEL has provided and used in these studies and in their report, is demonstrates the following benefits. So improvement in student social and emotional skills, attitudes, relationships, academic performance, obviously something that we're interested in, and perceptions of classroom and school climate. We see a decline in students' anxiety, behavioral problems, and substance use. We see long-term improvements in student skills, attitudes, and pro-social behavior, academic performance. And interestingly enough, I'll talk about this a little bit more, we see a return on the investment, because it is an investment, time, energy, and financial resources. So science links social emotional learning to student gains, and they have identified that social emotional skills increase improved attitudes about self and others in their school, positive classroom behavior, and that 11 percentile point gain in standardized achievement tests. So it's kind of like front loading. If we can teach and integrate social and emotional learning into the academic process that we have always been about, then we're going to see a return on that investment. And we're going to see a reduced risk of failure as far as like conduct problems and emotional stress. Other benefits, it benefits adults too. As we develop these skills, or hopefully have developed these skills, we've become a model for students and are able to reinforce those things. But not only that, it also reduces burnout. If we're able to self-care and we're able to have those support systems and dialogue with one another and collaborate with one another, we feel better about ourselves and have more capacity then to care for students in their social and emotional needs. Statistically, significant associations exist between measured social and emotional skills in kindergarten and young adult outcomes. So if we have those skills in place, starting to develop them at the kindergarten level, we see that kindergartners who are stronger in SEL competence are more likely to graduate from high school, which we just talked about in the report, complete a college degree, and to obtain stable employment in young adulthood, which is part of our primary objective, isn't it? And then we're less likely to be living on public housing. They're less likely to be receiving public assistance, less likely to be involved in with the police, and less likely to be in a detention facility, which is part of that financial return. If we can front load and put some emphasis on social and emotional learning now while we're young and developing, we won't have to pay the price later because of the lack of those skills. And that's what that slide's about. So we see an 11-to-1 return. So based on, in 2011, a meta-analysis, practical benefits, we see 27% more students who improve their academic performance. We see 57% gain in their skill levels. 24% more would have improved social behaviors and lower levels of distress. And 23% more would have improved attitudes. 22% would show fewer conduct problems, which is often one of the things that gets in the way of learning about things. So, Castle's framework, what are these core competencies that they talk about? What are the ingredients that go into an effective social and emotional learning program or construct? Self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision making. Those were the 5 key areas. And there are many competencies that fall under each of those broad categories, but they're all essential. Those were the ones that they found that could show successful integration and productive citizens. So here's just kind of a list, and I'll provide this slide for that. But it just shows where we start in the classroom and graduates to the school level, district level, family, and then the community. So it's an all-encompassing. So there is a growing demand for SEL, and I think we see that in particular right now with the COVID pandemic. Students are feeling isolated. I'm afraid that many of these skills are being stunted, and many of these attributes are being stunted because of the restrictions that we've had to do. You know, because primary care, we got to be healthy first, right? But it has taken its toll socially and emotionally for students, and I think we see that in the statistics that I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. But 92% of surveyed executives, this is where it goes into the workforce, say that skills such as problem solving and communicating clearly are equally or more important than the technical skills that they're looking for. Top 10 skills identified by the World Economic Forum all involve social and emotional competence, complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, people management, coordinating with others, emotional intelligence, judgment, decision making, service orientation, negotiation, and cognitive flexibility. Those are what people are looking for in the workforce. 65% of those surveyed executives say that they'd rather have college build up student life skills. Over half. student life skills. 7 top characteristics of success at a company are all SEL related skills, such as communicating, listening well, possessing insights into others, and having empathy. Priorities: conflict resolution, leadership, civic engagement. The Wall Street Journal stated they wanted employees who can shake hands, make small talk. The Bank of America teaches empathy in-house as part of their development process. They're seeing a lack of it with applicants coming in, and so they see the need to teach it themselves. 2, pays for soft skills training. So all these major Fortune 500 companies are invested in social emotion.
That's the end, Kim.
Okay. So it's important to the community. It's important to the school system. It's important to families. It's something that I recommend that we kind of dive into more so. I mean, it's always been that cornerstone, but we need to put some resources into it and give our teachers a skill set to help implement this into a cross-curricular instruction.
I was going to make a couple of comments. First of all, Ken, I've known him for a long time. But I mean, I know that he used to work at BHC, and you've also been a school counselor. You've also been a school principal. And just to see your passion for this, it's just awesome. So I'm super glad that our district is focusing, especially I think this past year with the pandemic. I mean, it's been exacerbated, even worse than what it already was in the state of Idaho. But I just appreciate the fact that you're so passionate about it, and I think that's awesome. And no better man to do it than you. You've got, I think, the expertise that's necessary to focus on something new like this in our district, just giving a background. So I think that's awesome. And I'm glad that the youth administration knows that you're the right man for the job, and I'm super happy about that. And I do think it's important. One thing that you pointed out, the 5 important things that they teach these kids to do for success. We have it listed over there on one of the slides. But I think it's important that we are flagging these kids at an early age if they have learning disabilities, ADHD, and encouraging those families to get treatment. I know a lot of that right now is kind of slides by in the school system. It might be recognized by teachers and the parents might go get tested, but I think maybe a little bit of that maybe needs to be encouraged more early, because I think when we can treat those kids at an early age for what's going on, then they're going to see success and have a higher self-esteem about themselves when they can focus in class, or if they can get treatment for a disability that they have and become more confident, and you're going to see them be successful. I think so. Early flagging of those kids, I think, is crucial.
Yeah, I think so. That was what was attractive. Like you said, I worked at the Behavioral Health Center prior to my career in education, and what I guess attracted me to the school system was that preventative piece. We can catch kids early. We can catch kids where we can identify, rather than in a crisis mode like you would in a psychiatric hospital. So yeah, a pound of prevention, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? We can catch them early.
Okay. These are all great principles. Is this a course, or do you train teachers, or how do you implement this in the schools? How do you?
So that's the nice thing about Castle's research, is it lays out a roadmap for us to follow and shows what has been effective in districts that have implemented this. And this is 20 years worth of research. We talk about SEL as though it's a recent kind of point. It's been around for 20 years. It's just that we're seeing more and more need, and it's becoming more and more dire. So how do we do that is basically your question. So we would start by probably formulating, a SEL team that it has representation from parents, has representation from administration, school system, community, students, and mental health providers. The one fortunate thing that we have in our district are virtually all of our counselors, and every school has a counselor at the elementary level. Every high school, middle school have multiple counselors. Virtually everybody is a clinician and licensed through the statewide, which is a really high standard to have. And not all schools have that, not all districts have that, but it's been a priority for this district. And so we're fortunate that we have a lot of highly trained professionals within our school system to draw on. Now, to teach those skills, we probably will have to integrate that into our academic and help build capacity of teachers and help them, because there's no way that one counselor can get around to 600 students, right? But through our teachers, we can. So I see a lot of training taking place. We cross-curricular instruct. We built that into our instruction. And then we have counselors available for like tier 2 intervention, which would be like one-on-one counseling. It might be small group counseling. It might be attending those kinds of things. Then we have tier 3, which is crisis intervention. It may be making referrals. It may be doing risk assessments and things like that. So there's different tiers of intervention that every child needs to develop these social and emotional skills, and we have to blend that in somehow into our daily instruction.
Any other questions or comments or anything?
I think I heard you before. Have you been in contact with schools that I always talk about it one time? So Madison School District, I have a connection up there with somebody that helps with their program, so we're in collaboration with them. But interestingly enough, I just later I go with a gentleman who is a statistical guru in the Austin School District. And he works closely with their SEL team, with their data. And they've been doing this for the last 10 years. And so he and I are in collaboration. So even out of the state. And in a large school district, I think they have like 48,000 students. Oh, wow. And I think it's absolutely, it's just a nickel and work how they're done. But it's also nice that they take out. Yeah, what's also nice is they have all these rubrics, these assessments and rubrics available, so that you can take a look at, like, there's a million programs out there for sale, of course, right, that want to attend to like social emotional stuff. But we can take any one of those and stack them up to their rubrics and identify how strongly they align to this model and all the research. So, that's a process, of course, but it's doable. And so when we hone in on something, but there are several steps ahead of that, of course. And I think building the capacity of teachers, they're under a tremendous amount of stress and anxiety right now too. We need to do some self-care there and make sure that they have the capacity to be able to help attend to the social emotional development of our students as well.
So we're not talking about more personnel, more money necessarily. We have people in place to implement.
Yes. Yeah, there will be a cost at some point for some of the stuff that we do, but it's minimal compared to what we're getting. Yeah, it won't be a large, heavy cost.
Chad, could I also speak to that for a moment? So in the school system, we always have limited resources, and the two things are money and time. And I'll just tell you, time is more valuable than money. And so as we've talked about it, what we have to do is, number one, identify as a district, is this our first priority? Is this more important right now than, say, focusing on literacy or focusing on math fluency? And as we talk as a leadership team with our principals, we all wholeheartedly believe that it is. And part of the reason is because we've had a strong academic focus really for the last 10 years in our PLCs. All we talk about in our professional learning communities is academics, academics, academics. And that's good, but when we neglected this other part of it, now we're in crisis. Our kids are feeling that. So, so the cost to me in the first place is going to be with time, and how do we dedicate enough time for our teachers to really be able to focus on this. And it starts by not rolling out a program next year. I can tell you that right now, there's no way that our teachers feel like they would have the capacity to start a new program. So really, next year, we have to take that collaboration time that we have and give teachers permission and support to really learn about what is social emotional learning, why is it important, and what can we all do to support that. And so as we've talked, what I'm really hopeful and prayerful about is that we're on the other side of this crazy online blended learning situation we faced this year, and we can use that collaboration time to really focus on something I believe is going to make a difference in every student's life. And then the other resource is we have to have a strong leader who's committed and that we've given enough time and attention that they can really focus on that. And so with that, Ken's done a great job this year of serving 2 masters. He's been still the principal at Discovery, and we've given him some tremendous help and support with an assistant principal this year, a very talented young assistant principal. But Ken really has to have a full-time to focus his energies on this. And so with that, we're going to ask Ken to serve full-time in this position, and we'll open up the Discovery principalship. That'll be a hardship for Discovery teachers. I know he's done a great job there. Is it 13 years now? 13. That he's been there and just done a tremendous job and built a tremendous school that's always excelled academically. But as with any great principal, they set it up for success. I'm confident the next person can come in and build on the success he's built there. But there's no question in my mind, as Chairman Landers alluded to, Ken is our administrator who's has that strong mental health background, who's still a practicing licensed counselor. He knows this more intimately than any other individual in the district. And so I've got full faith and confidence that he's the right person to lead us and really make this a successful program for our kids. But we're gonna slow our roll on it. We're not gonna buy a program and say, here you go, teachers, implement this. We really need that time to work with our teachers to develop their capacity to do it. Maybe something real quick personal. The thought that came to my mind as we were talking about that is when I was 12 years old, they decided to have scout camp at Palisades Lake just with our scout troop rather than going up to Treasure Mountain. And for our quote unquote mile or 100-yard swim, they just said, swim out, out there quarter mile or so and swim back. And they paired us up with a buddy. And I was not a good swimmer. I could go into a couple stories on why I'm not a good swimmer, but I'll just keep to this one for now. So they paired me up with a buddy. We go out there, and about 2/3 of the way to where our turnaround point was, I panicked. I had a complete and total panic attack. Started sinking into the water. I was just fighting up and down, very, very close to drowning. And fortunately, the individual they paired me with was a very experienced swimmer, who knew exactly what he had to do. He stayed calm. He got me to calm down. He put his arm around me and he pulled me back to shore. Our teachers have to feel that they've got the capacity to be that person who's not drowning. He says, yeah, I've got this. I know how to help and support you. I can take kids back. But if you know people know how to do it, they look like they're drowning, then nobody's going to come out the other side of that. And so that's really what we have to do this year is give our teachers that capacity to feel like, yeah, we've got this. But it's been a heck of a tough year on our teachers as well. It's been an extremely demanding and stressful year. I'm so grateful that they stuck it out with us this far. I hope I'll take a big breath over the summer. And like I said, we're going to do this a piece at a time to really build their capacity.
So the investment is front loaded in that training, in that development.
I'm excited. I'm glad that we're focusing on this. I'm super happy that you're going to be in charge. I can't think of a better person to do it.
That leadership comes from, our superintendent, his help at the district level. I mean, they see the need, and they've done it, surveys already to try and gather some data, so we can get the ground running. So
All of those statistics you quoted were pre-COVID.
yes, yeah.
So what's happened during this COVID experience?
I don't know that there's any
Not
recent
full
data
year.
to show, right?
The CDC has data, and it's brutal. It's
Yeah,
bad.
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
It's really bad.
and you can bet that's significantly higher.
My husband sees a very big, it's so much worse. Well, thank you. This is exciting, and I'm glad that we're focusing on that. Thank you, guys. Appreciate that. Thank you to the demonstration for seeing that move as well. It's awesome. You guys are doing a great job. All right, Jason Lord, with policy considerations.
Okay, in front of you, we have a proposed policy for initial consideration. This policy, it's just the, we've had a few instances over the last few years of bed bugs. And as we deal with it, we go back and look at our policy. How do we handle this? Do we switch it to the school, if another thing, now we have right now our policy that we're close to that, is the last policy, which doesn't necessarily fit that same way. And so Corey Smith, our district nurse, did some research and put a lot of work into this policy, and then Mary made it look like a policy. And so that's what you have in front of you right now is just for that initial consideration of what's called bed policy would be. There's also an exhibit that goes with it, and then an informational form or informational letter that goes home to parents that let them know about that. So, and the exhibit is guidance for the teachers and the leadership. Are there any questions just on that initial?
Good questions from the board about that policy? And there's no motion required because it's initial consideration.
Yeah,
So,
that's right.
so thank you, Jason, for that.
Thank you, John.
All right. Principal McLaren. We have something exciting that you could talk to us about.
I don't think I can compete with Ken. What kind of excitement? But I do have 19 slide power. Chairman Landers, thanks for the opportunity to present to you our recommendation for assistant principal. Just to give you a little background on our process that we took, we opened up the position, I believe, right in the middle of January, and it closed toward the right at the end of January 30th, I think it closed. We had 39 applicants submit an application for that position. I think that demonstrates some great things going on in Bonneville County and some great things that I hope we have going on at Thunder Ridge. People want to be part of that that environment that we fostered here. And in fact, a lot of the candidates in the cover letter, they said I want to come work at Bonneville School District 93. So that was very reassuring and encouraging to us. And as we went through the process of weeding through those 39 applicants, there was a lot of great applicants from all over the United States. We had one from New Hampshire, one in Alaska, some in Oklahoma, Oregon, around the state and locally here. So it was a very difficult process with so many, and we tried to build a criteria to weed through those applicants, and we narrowed it down to 11. And of those 11, we sent out to our panel, our interview committee, and they reviewed those applicants, and as well as some pre-application, pre-interview questions that we asked those, those top 11 to respond to. And then we narrowed it down to 5. We interviewed 5 on Monday, and we had great applicants to interview, great interviews, and I've had not much sleep because we had such a good dialogue, strong dialogue about a couple of the candidates that we narrowed down to. And where we ended up with was one of our very own, Tony Jackson. A couple of reasons that we felt strong about him is not just that he had some institutional knowledge and some knowledge about how we do things and our expectations at Thunder Ridge, but in the past year especially, he's extended himself above the typical athletic director responsibilities that we would ask him to do, and he's stepped over into the administrative type responsibilities, being out in the hall, working with kids, building relationships with non-athletes, non-activity members. He's done some things just to support the administrative responsibilities in the building, and he's worked with teachers closely. He's trying to go out of his way to meet with teachers and build relationships. In fact, that was one of the things that really struck me in his interview was just his desire to build relationships, get to know kids individually by name, visit classrooms as much as possible, find out what teachers need to help and support them in their classrooms. So with that, I am very happy and pleased because I know he's going to do a great job, and I know he's going to add to our team and add to what we are currently doing, and also challenge and improve things that are going on at Thunder Ridge. So with that, I recommend Cody Jackson as the assistant principal's to replace Craig Miller.
So with that, I know that this is something that the board needs to make a motion on. And after the motion, assuming that's all positive, I would love to hear from Cody as well. So does anybody have a motion to put out with the recommendation from principal?
Chairman Landers, I would move that we accept Cody Jackson as the principal of Thunder Ridge High School.
Right, it's been moved by Mr. Gantz to accept the recommendation. It's been seconded by Mr. Culver. Is there any discussion on that from the board? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Congratulations, Cody. We would love to hear.
Chairman Landers, school board, I guess my main thing, I'm excited. I've been part of Thunder Ridge right from the get-go. We've had a great, I guess for me and Doug, great 4 years. When we first got hired, it's been awesome. We got a lot of great faculty, students. My main thing is I'm very excited to be here. I'm going to go above and beyond expectations and put forth my best effort and do what we can to help out the teachers and the students at Thunder Ridge High School.
That's awesome. We're so excited to have you. And I know on a personal level, you know, the amazing job you've done as an athletic director and the help that you give parents and having a daughter over there in sports and stuff. And I've heard tons of positive feedback from parents about you. So I know you're doing an amazing job over there. We appreciate it. And we're just excited.
Thank you. It's always good to hear.
Cody, good job. Exciting.
What did you say, Doug, 40 applicants?
Yeah, 39.
39 applicants for Thunder Ridge assistant principal. We got about 4 for the superintendent.
Nobody wants that job.
That means that there's 40 smarter people that are put into that. All right. Okay, so we needed to have John come talk to us about the subdivision of our Ridgeview. More and more of these.
Some time ago, the board declared a surplus a piece of property that we had purchased so we might build an access road into Thunder Ridge High School complex. Having declared it surplus, did a little work with one of our local engineers, created a plat for that property, and then we advertised a public offering for bids to purchase that property. We received 2 bids as part of that process, a bid for $200,000 and a bid for $401,000. The bid for $401,000 is from JV Enterprises LLC. The appraised value with the improvements that we have made is right around $35,000 an acre, and that bid just would exceed the appraised value slightly for those that land. So it would be my recommendation to the board that they accept that bid. I feel like that is an appropriate bid for that property, and then I'll leave that in your capable hands to determine.
A quick question, how long was the appraisal?
The appraisal was just done a couple months ago. Probably finished just prior to the advertising.
And who did the appraisal?
Kelly Appraisal. And we had that appraised previously. He did an update to the appraisal based on the sewer system improvements that we have made and the plat and how that all lays out. So.
And do you want to remind the board which piece of property this is?
So this is the piece on 45th South, and it is the piece that is to the south of the access road. It is, between 10 and 11 acres of property. It connects into the Ridgeview subdivision. Ladino actually feeds into that subdivision, if you're familiar with that over there. As part of the plat, there is no access on the 45th. There's no access onto the Thunder Ridge access road. So all those lots are contained within the Ridgeview subdivision.
Okay, so it's that piece of property to the right of the entrance off Valley.
Correct. As you're entering into the school, that's what you see.
All that property off to the right.
Yes.
Awesome. Go ahead, we need a motion.
I'll move that we accept the bid from JV Enterprises for the Ridgeview number 4 subdivision lot sale.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Calder,
I second it.
seconded by Mr. Dance. Any discussion from the board? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Good deal. Another one done. Okay, Dr. Wilson here now for the most unfun part of the night. We're going to be talking about the phase 1 reopening plan, specifically our mask requirements.
Thank you, Chairman Landers. So as we do in these meetings, I'll just take a brief moment to review what our current situation is with COVID in our school district. This chart shows, going back to the start of the school year, what the trend in our active cases has been, and you can see that right now we're basically as low as we were back at the start of the school year. And so that is just fantastic news for how things have been going. And again, it's a trend that we see not just in our school district, but also in the county as well. This is basically the same graph, just in addition to showing the staff and student rates in orange and blue. What we have in the columns behind it are the number of students in quarantine. And you can see before Christmas, we had a high number of students who are being quarantined on a daily basis. Typically, we're reaching that peak of about 300 students out of our school district that were being quarantined. And then really, for the last 6 weeks, we have not really had to have to quarantine any students because of the change in direction from the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare that if students are wearing masks and they are not required to quarantine. And so it's been a huge blessing to our kids to be able to stay in school, even if they've been in close contact with someone at school, because of the masks that we have in place. And then this one is, just shows our rate in blue compared with the county-wide rate from Eastern Idaho Public Health. And probably the critical thing from this is just seeing that we've trended down both at the county level first, and then at the district level down into the green or the minimal risk phase, which is again, great news for how things are going, not just here, but out in the county, especially for our hospitals that when I listened to the last public health board meeting, they were reporting that they're not nearly as overwhelmed with COVID cases as they were, and it's really down to a minimal level of care that they're having to provide. And then the other piece of great news that you're aware of, I want to make sure we're showing the community is in the vaccinations we've been able to do. I want to pass along to the school board on behalf of our teachers. I cannot tell you how many teachers expressed appreciation. Number one, that they were able to get the vaccine, but two, specifically for us creating that half day on Fridays so that it was an available time for them to go and get it. It gave them a weekend to recover if there were adverse effects. I wouldn't say that that was common. There were certainly some that felt those adverse effects. I think Guy could speak to that firsthand this evening. He had a pretty rough Saturday and the Sunday following his second round. So just really grateful that the board supported of that action, and our teachers were just incredibly grateful. I just want to again express appreciation on behalf of our teachers and employees. Just incredible staff from Mountain View Hospital. Their pharmacy staff, you can see pictures here. They were the ones that were, again, in a space of just over 3 hours, threw up 700 vaccines for our employees and staff. They provided nursing staff, we provided nursing staff. The Idaho State University Pharmacy Tech Program provided pharmacy students who were all putting people through and getting those vaccinations. And some of our board members were there and saw that. It was honestly incredible to see that we could get 700 people through and vaccinated in that short amount of time. And it was just a tremendous collaborative effort from all those people involved. Corey Smith who's our district nurse, was such a key part of getting our nurses organized and helping and participating in that. For some reason, she said they were thrilled to go get people shots in the arm because they don't get to do that in their school duties. So kind of strange to me, but they certainly enjoyed doing that. And I received one from one of our nurses, and she did a heck of a job. And then the other thing I just want to highlight quickly, we had HR staff who came over to help and support that as well. And then I don't think you've had a chance to meet Helen, but right here in the blue cardigan is Helen Nixon. She's our public health intern, has been working with us since right after Christmas. She's been just phenomenal to work with. She was great help in coordinating the vaccinations. A tremendous amount of communication with our employees. It's a lot of work to get 700 people scheduled there, deal with all of them, can't make it at this time, and come at a different time, just all those questions. And it was a godsend that Helen has come and worked with our district to help us do this. So just got to express enough appreciation for everybody who worked together to make this happen. On Monday, on President's Day, we'll be back at Hillcrest to catch our last 300 employees. So when we did the first vaccination, we got 700 people, and we had 300 more, but we weren't able to have vaccines available for us. We did them the following Monday on a collaboration day, and then we'll catch those up on Monday, and then it's not that our teachers have done, but those are really the clinics that we're providing, and from then on, we'll have local public health or provided to get the vaccine. So with that, the other key thing that we're all aware of that's changed is changes in the health orders that are out there. I shared this slide with the board clear back in August, I think, when we were first looking to start in school. And it's a critical thing for us to be aware of as we look at, I don't want to say we're on the other side of this, but we're certainly in a different place than we've been for the school year. So there are really 3 levels of public health guidance. It's not really guidance, because there's the first level is guidance, and then the second level are public health plans, and then the third level are actual public health orders. And so those health orders, I just again want to express my gratitude to the school board and to Doug Nelson, our attorney. We're in a few districts that have really stepped by and said, we're going to follow our statutory responsibility and comply with public health orders. There's a lot of districts around us that took what could be perceived as an easier route out and just simply said, if we don't agree with it, we're not going to follow it. And I just appreciate the support all the way from the board down through our classroom teachers on following those health orders. But statutorily, as we put over here on our responsibility, those are things that legally we must comply with. And then one step above that are public health plans. And to me, there's just a difference between guidance that's provided, which is something we still need to listen to and should listen to, should consider. But I think when we get to the guidance level, that's when we need to use our own judgment about what else we have to balance with that guidance when it comes to providing education to our students. I spoke with Doug Nelson, again, our district attorney, about this today, just to make sure that he agreed and he concurred with this assessment. The one thing he did add is he said, if you do take action that's contrary to that guidance, it does put you in increased liability, which I understand that, and that is something to consider. But I think we're weighing, again, risks and benefits of things like masks against other risks and benefits, like we talk about social and emotional health and well-being of our kids. And that's really the discussion we've had. Is it's not that masks are, there are people who certainly think that they're an inconvenience, that they're not easy to wear and those things. For us, the much more important consideration is what is the impact to our kids on their social and emotional health, their relationships with teachers, their relationships with other students when they're required to wear masks for 7 hours every day at school. We truly never get to see each other smile or laugh or have that critical body language and nonverbal interactions. Questions about this before I go to where we are now? Okay. So here's a timeline of where we've been and where we are now when it comes to public health orders. So we have been under a public health order from Eastern Idaho Public Health since the middle of July. And that really, because we recognized our legal responsibility to comply with that health order, that really took away our autonomy as a school board and the school district to make decisions that were contrary to that public health order. So when it comes to things like masks, as much as our patrons were wanting us to have discussions about what are the benefits and risks of masks, the reality is we couldn't legally have that discussion or at least make a different decision because there's a health order that said they're required in the county. That health order was rescinded last week, and so now because that was rescinded, we can now have that conversation and discussion and debate about what are the risks and benefits of masks compared to what are the challenges that come with those. Just to make things, as we've all experienced in the last few months, even more complicated, is on top of the local health order, the state issued their own health orders that were layered on top of it. And so now we were not just making sure we're complying with one order, but two different orders that sometimes have conflicting guidance. And again, I just can't express enough appreciation for the board for being patient and really for our patrons as well as we work through those conflicting orders. And to make it even more fun, those orders changed on us throughout the course of the winter. So it started with the stage 3 health order that came out middle of October. Within a matter of a couple of weeks, the governor moved this to stage 2 and issued a subsequent health order. Those ones never did contain a mask requirement, interestingly. They really impacted us when it came to gatherings as we went through that. When I woke up this morning, I thought we still had a health order in place. I knew we moved back to stage 3, but I assumed that there was still a health order with stage 3 like we had back in October, November. When I actually went to the state website today, I noticed that they did not use the word order, they issued guidelines. And there's a key reason I put it in green is now we have guidelines from the state and not a health order. And so we're no longer under that statutory requirement that we have to comply. Not that we should just ignore them completely, but thank heavens, now in February, the board, you and with the administration, we've got the autonomy now to make decisions that are best for our district. And I did discuss that with Doug Nelson, and he concurred. I also coincidentally had a meeting with that I'm on that includes Greg Wilson from the governor's office and a few other superintendents across the state. And I put that question to him point blank, and he acknowledged it. Yes, it is. They are guidelines, and it's interesting. They spent the first 5 or 10 minutes talking about the plan from the state board, but the reality is all those are guidelines now. And so we're really not under that same requirement to comply with those that we had before. So with that, I will be making recommendations to on specific actions related to our reopening plan. In anticipation of that, I felt like it was very important that we listen and get feedback from our parents and from our staff on how they're feeling about the mask requirement. And I would just say, I'm not advocating that we put this out as a popularity contest and we just take what they say, but I think it's critical that we listen to feedback from our parents and from our staff on how they're feeling about it. As we've seen through the course of this year, I think where school districts sometimes have gotten in trouble with papers is they haven't listened. They haven't given them that opportunity to provide input. And as a result, we see things like recall elections and resignations from boards, and that's the last of them. I've been so grateful we've been able to get to this point with a lot of that political turmoil, and I think the large part is because we made a concerted effort to make sure we are asking our parents and our staff questions so we know how they feel about these critical topics. So the first question in the survey was, and if I could just, I know that there was public comments, I just want to address that quickly. I did preface the survey with a 2-column chart listing both the benefits and the challenges of wearing masks. There have been several people that have given me some helpful criticism about that. I'll just say this, I cited, all that information came from a medical journal. I cited that medical journal at the bottom of that, and I was simply summarizing the things from that. So some people felt I weighted this too much or weighted that too much. All I did was I found the best medical journal I could find on the benefits and challenges of wearing masks and used that to inform our patrons about those. So with that, first really easy question for people, simply do you support removing the mask requirement? And just because I'm kind of a statistical nerd, I also asked, so people got one of 2 random questions. Do you support removing the mask requirement and do you support keeping the mask requirement? So they only saw one of these 2, but I wanted to use those 2 because I didn't want it to be perceived that I was trying to bias the information one way or the other. So when for those people who got the support removing the mask requirement question, you can see that 70% of our parents supported removing the mask requirement and 57% of our staff supported removing the mask requirement. And then on the opposed side, 45% of our staff were opposed to it, and 26% of our parents were opposed to removing it. And just asking that question in a reverse manner, we had 64% of our parents who were opposed to keeping the mask requirement, and 57% of our teachers. So not perfect correlation, but pretty good correlation between those 2. And so no question, you're just asking, would you prefer to keep it or remove it? The preference for both staff and parents is to remove the mask requirement. So the next question I asked is, again, looking back at that information on why would we consider removing the mask requirement? Is it simply because it's an inconvenience, or is there validity to the thought that these do create some challenges? And 66% of our teachers perceive that they would have much more positive interactions with students if they didn't have the mask requirement. So 2-to-1 ratio, our teachers are feeling that yes, they would have more positive interactions. And I'm not saying that's a trump card and we should just say that's only, but I definitely think that's a key variable for us to consider. A quarter of our teachers felt like there wouldn't be a change in their interactions with students. And then I did ask, again, both parents and employees about how they would, what their perceptions would be removing the mask requirement to their health and safety. So for staff, the health and safety of their own health and safety, and for parents, the health and safety of their children. So again, I wasn't asking if they thought masks worked or didn't work. It's just if we remove this requirement, what do you think the impact is going to be? And candidly, mostly interested in our employees. Do you really feel like, and how many of our employees feel like they are going to get increased risk if this is lifted? So 38% of our employees felt that they were at higher or much higher risk. And so while the majority of people didn't see that, that's still a very strong consideration for us. If we change this mask requirement, almost 40% of our employees are going to feel that their safety, their own personal health and safety is much more at risk or more at risk. And then 31% of our parents said that they thought their children would also be at higher risk. And then everybody's favorite question was this reality that if we do lift the mask requirement, there will be more students in quarantine from school. There's no question in my mind. We're still seeing COVID cases. It's not like we've stopped seeing active COVID cases in our school. I think they saw 8 to 10 different alerts about COVID cases, primarily among students, if there might be 1 or 2 staff members. So without masks, we will see those numbers go up. And so I just want to ask people, would you prefer that the students are required to wear masks or prefer that they have to quarantine? The truth is, most people would prefer neither one. They would love to have a neither option. That's not our reality. Our reality is we either have to do one or the other. So for me, this is a good counterbalance to the first question. Do you prefer it? Well, I actually prefer that, but here's the consequence if we do. So 56% of our employees prefer keeping the mask requirement imposed, or that's not the right way to say that. I asked which one do you think would be better for students? And so 56% of our staff said that they felt wearing masks would be better for students, and 61% of our parents said that they felt it would be better for students to continue to have to wear masks versus having a quarantine. The challenge is, not everything's going to have to quarantine. Right now, if our numbers stay low, if it's only 8 to 10 a day, that's a pretty small number of kids that will have to quarantine based on that versus thousands that will not have to wear masks. So, and then we did ask teachers how many would still require face coverings in their classrooms. 22% said they would, 23% weren't sure, and then 55% said if we looked at the mask mandate, then they would not continue to require face coverings in their classroom. And 82% of bus drivers said they will not require them on the bus. And then we asked parents how many would still have their own children wear face coverings at school if we didn't require it, and 2/3 of our parents said that they would stop having their children wear masks at school. My wife is not one of those 2/3, by the way, so. Okay, are you okay there? And then the last question, and again, this is a critical one, is asking our parents, if we do look at the mask requirement, how many of you will ask to go to online instruction instead of staying in school? I didn't show this as a percentage because I think the number matters here. And there's 353 of our parents felt that they would want to go to online instead of keeping their kids in brick and mortar school. So that's the other information you have as we look at making a decision tonight. Just for number of respondents, we had 3,700, just over 3,700 of our parents respond, just under 780 of our employees. That gives us a 99% confidence with these results, with a plus or minus 2% either way on parents and plus or minus 3% on employees. So here, just the things that we've had a waiting discussion since Bonneville County looked at the mask mandate. There was part of it was relieved they looked at the mask mandate, and then part of this, crap, now we've got this difficult decision ourselves dealing about it. It's certainly much easier when we can simply say, sorry, that's the law. So the things we talked about on reasons to keep it, and again, I think all of our board members are well aware of this, but there are certainly scientific studies that I completely and wholeheartedly believe are accurate that say that wearing a mask does slow the spread of the disease and helps prevent us from transmitting it to others. I think I'll talk about that at the bottom. There is still universal recommendations from every public health agency that we still wear a mask. So the CDC has not changed that, the Department of Health and Welfare has not changed that, the Public Health has not changed that. All they've done is remove the mandatory requirement to do it. They're all still saying it's very best practice to wear masks. We know that it does, that masks will help protect the health and safety of our most vulnerable staff and students, and I've had people reach out about our own employees with their own health conditions, families with their health conditions at home, our employees with their health conditions with their loved ones. It's a lot of the same thing we heard in the fall. We were in school, and those concerns have not gone away from those people. And as we talk about minimizing number of students who must quarantine after exposure to COVID, we keep the mask requirement. And our employees, number one, they're not fully immunized yet. Even the ones that have received the vaccine are not fully immunized yet. They're only for several weeks. And even though we've done a remarkable job of having 1,000 of our employees be vaccinated, that still leaves right around 700 more employees that have not been vaccinated. And some of it is because of choice, but some of it's not. Some people have been told by their doctors, now is not time for you to get the vaccine based on various medical conditions they have. So we can't simply say, well, they have a chance and now it's gone, so tough on them. The reality is there's some very valid medical reasons why people cannot receive the vaccine yet. The reasons that we talk about in our leadership team on and with principals about removing the mask requirement, I don't think there's any question it does impair effective verbal and nonverbal communication among staff and students. I do believe it has had an impact on the social and emotional well-being of our kids. It's been a tough year. We can't say it's all because of masks. It's everything combined. It's going all the way back to the school shutdown, to activities being canceled, to masks are part of that as well. And we're a little strict in my house. My kids have gone to some friends' houses for different activities, and they've been the only one wearing a mask there. And part of my kids are doing that. Those things do take a toll on you when you're a teenager. They certainly can have that social and emotional impact on you. So we do see that they tend to have a negative impact on adult-student relationships. And the number one reason, well, there's really two reasons, and our principals talk about it in our meetings. One is when you're consistently on kids, pull up your mask, pull up your mask, pull up your mask, where's your mask, where's your mask, where's your mask? Those have a negative impact. And so Doug, the chair, and I talk about it. Instead of telling kids hi when they come to school, I'm asking about their masks, and those have an impact on those relationships. And I think we've got phenomenal principals who do a great job of building positive relationships with kids, and that has certainly been impacted when they're continually having to enforce this mask requirement. The teachers are no different. They're continually having to enforce it in classrooms, and it certainly has an impact on those relationships. And then just things like, I can't tell you how many times I smile at people and all of a sudden dawns on me, they get time smiling at them, they have no idea. And so I felt as a superintendent, as I interact with people in schools and those things, I just am not connecting with people like I normally can because they do create a barrier. And so that's the weighty decision we have to make is between those two, what's the right answer? And to me, it's really a balance between physical health and safety and emotional safety and well-being for both staff and our kids. And it's not an easy decision to make. But I felt like it would be important for us as an administration not just say, okay, there you go, school board, have at it. Good luck with making the decision. So we did talk extensively with principals. We asked our principals to have extensive conversations with their teachers. We shared the data that I shared with you tonight. And based on all that information, the recommendation we'd like to make to the board is effective March 8th, that we would wait until March 8th to move our schools back to phase 1 of the reopening plan and make the following changes. And this is contingent on our active rate in our schools staying below that active rate that's been set by the county, which would be the 15 per 10,000 for 3 consecutive days. So if we start seeing numbers back up, I'm not really interested in saying, okay, we should still go without masks. I really think these next 3 weeks are going to be critical to make sure that downward trend we see in this really low rate of COVID in our school stays before we make that decision, we should lift the mask requirement. So with that, what I'd say is in our reopening plan, it currently states that staff and students will be expected to wear masks. And I would suggest that the board would change that to state that they're strongly encouraged to wear masks. I think saying that they're expected is a weak word when it comes to having any idea what we're supposed to do when kids are expected to wear masks. And I think we either have to say they're required or they're encouraged, but I don't want to leave this middle ground that nobody knows whether they're enforcing or not enforcing. So with that, I would say, again, we would follow currently what East Idaho Public Health states. They're stating we are strongly encouraging people to wear masks, and I think we should mirror that in each of our schools. With the exception that we would give school bus drivers, teachers, and based on the suggestions of our principals, coaches, and advisors of extracurricular activities, and school principals the authority to require masks when they feel like it's necessary. And I think that's a critical part. We know that we have teachers that are vulnerable, that are very concerned for their, again, their health and safety, or the health and safety of loved ones at home, that we need to give them that authority to say, in my classroom, I really need to wear masks. We're going to require it and still enforce it in those classrooms or on the school buses. The reason I put principals in there isn't necessarily that I would expect the school to have a school-wide mask requirement, but it's more about if, for example, in the kitchen, if there's a vulnerable staff member, then we can say, okay, when you're in line, you need to wear masks in line. If you're in a media center, you need to wear a media center. There might be some specific locations in that school that need to be designated, and I thought the principals are going to make that determination working with their employees. And then the other change that I would suggest we make is that we would state that students and employees who do not wear masks at school will be required to quarantine. The default, if you are wearing a mask, you will not be required to quarantine. Currently, the guidance from the state school board is that you would, both parties would have to wear masks. I think if kids are going to wear a mask, we should report them for that, and we can do it through health checks and those things, but I think we should allow them to stay in school if they are exposed. So that's the recommendation that I put forward for the board's consideration.
All right, so I guess we'll turn this over to the school board. Do you guys have questions for the admin team?
So one is it correct that the current not an order, it's not guidance, it's the middle?
There's a plan.
Yeah, so current health, United health plan.
Okay.
That is still saying everybody should wear masks if they can't social distance. Is that what
They're strong, yeah, so their verbiage is people are strongly encouraged to wear masks if they cannot social distance.
So that's the health guidance. And
Yeah, and a plan. Yeah.
and it's not an order. Yeah. Not legally down to follow, but
Yeah.
strongly encouraged to.
Yeah.
Okay. And then second, what's your thoughts? Did you get any feedback from principals or teachers about, instead of just looking at people, that is saying masks are required, but teachers can allow them to be removed in circumstances where they think it's appropriate.
And currently, that's actually what our plan states, is we always said masks are required unless you're otherwise directed by a teacher. But I think we've been so clear in communication that we're under a mask order and kids need to wear masks that that people comply with that. So we could say they're still required, but really it's your call. I don't know that it's gonna, I guess it could change some, but I guess if I'm a teacher, I'm not sure how I'm supposed to do it. If I'm really told I should be doing it, unless there's a reason not to, which, you know, that is what our plan currently states. So we could just keep that verbiage that's there.
Yeah, I'm so much advocating, although having the things from an administrative compliance point of view, that's a better way to say it. The end result may be exactly the same either way, I don't know for sure, but anyway, I'd be interested in other people's thoughts and different other administrative thoughts. I'm not set on that. Those are the two things that came to my mind. But I'm generally supportive of the thinking. It's helpful to have the data about the survey stuff. But I'm where I think I've always been, where generally I don't have any particular interest in going against public health standards.
Yeah.
That's kind of my starting point.
I don't know if it's helpful. I would just say, the principals have all seen this. They shared back, I can't say every teacher agrees with that. I wouldn't say that. They listened to those concerns, they shared those. I did share it with the BDA. They had an executive team meeting last night, and they all felt like this was the right way to go. So as I think about that, Mary, again, I just think, okay, if I was putting myself back in the principal's shoes, I'm still going to be enforcing masks in the hallways at lunchtime. I'm still going to do all that. You know, when kids into the classroom, they might be told by the teacher, you don't need to wear a mask. So they're going to come out without a mask, and I'm going to enforce in the hallway. And it's just, I just feel like it's more, harder to enforce what those expectations are versus here's my 10 teachers who said, I'm gonna require the mask and I'm gonna support those teachers. If that teacher says this kid's not, then I'm gonna address it with that student and their family. But I just think the other way to me is really challenging. Do you have any other thoughts on that? And we have principals here who can speak as well. We did. Levi's here, and Justin's here from Fairview, Colby's here from Summit Hills, and Thomas we're not going to listen to because he's involved in that. So,
And I'm sure that's been part of the concern that our schools have had, is it's just felt like it's been, don't do this, you can't do this, stop doing that, and yeah, and so I think for them, being able to say, you know what, we know where we need to be wearing it, we can manage that.
yeah, right. For me, it would certainly flip the coin to be able to tell kids, hey, way to go, I'm so glad you're wearing a mask, and really do that positive reinforcement, and right now, I think just so much on the negative consequence side of things, that it's hard.
Yeah, no, that's certainly very much your practical response to that. And I don't have a reason to be arguing with you about your perception of what would be easier.
Sure, minors, if you're okay, I just asked, and we have some principals here, what their thoughts are on
Yeah,
that.
I'm absolutely open to hearing what they have to say. I would love it.
Any principals want to speak to that? If we were to simply keep the language as it states, which is it's required unless otherwise directed by a teacher not to. Happy birthday, by the way, Levi.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Can't think of a better place to spend my birthday than.
That's right. So, really, I think, Scott, you've hit the nail on the head. It's easier to manage the way that we're proposing. That being said, I don't know what the right answer is. I can tell you what our experience has been. It's been echoed here very clearly that we used to love really coming to work and doing our job, interacting with kids, and over the last year, that joy's gone because we're just constantly policing and having those negative interactions. I've got to say personally, my family's similar to Scott's. We've been maskers. We go everywhere wearing masks. My kids go to activities wearing masks. 2 weeks ago, my personal opinion maybe changed slightly with some of the situations that we're dealing with. You know, Ken talked about where we're at in some of our schools, and that's where we're at. Yeah. And so when I start looking at that piece,
You might just clearly state what that piece is so that people all understand what we're talking about.
yeah. So within the last 2 weeks, that we know of, have had 6 legitimate attempted suicides that required hospitalization, either at the Behavioral Health Center, at Hermac, or one of the other hospitals to receive treatment. Luckily, knock on wood, all of those attempts, there was an intervention in enough time to preserve life. But daily, we are dealing with that social emotional aspect of kids just being done. And so as I balance that, I really appreciated the comments and public input because they echo a lot, maybe what I personally feel, what I've thought the entire time as we've talked about masks, that, you know, if I can give someone's one more Christmas with grandpa, I'm more than happy to do that. If I can, you know, stop somebody from going through a lifelong result of COVID, I'm more than happy to do that. Days of kids is going to change that. I think there's a million other indicators and reasons that play into that. But I do know when we've had opportunities, and we took an opportunity last week to have an opportunity to interact with kids without masks. Interaction with those areas that we just haven't talked to me that day, and I'd be like, no mask, you know, great idea to get rid of them. I'm on the back of the fence, right? But I think those are fair things to balance out. When we look from administratively, what's easier to manage, for sure it would be to not have a mask mandate and support teachers that want it. Rather than having to go around in all those opportunities and, you know, sort of the Oprah, you don't have to wear a mask, you don't have to wear a mask, right? You know what I mean? And so, it's a tough call, it's a tough decision, but I do think that we are putting our kids' lives in the balance with our current climate. Mask may or may not change that completely, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
You were told you couldn't talk, and here you are. Really?
It's 5 points on air. So, no, and you know, it's been a great year just with, you know, the help families who needed to be online this year, and, you know, working with the elementary principals. I guess, you know, me and Ken were kind of the first ones here, and through a text stream, I got volunteered to share some thoughts, and so I'm happy to do so. I think overall, just having that choice for teachers is really important. I think the only concern is really just the impact of a teacher who says everyone has to wear masks, with kids whose parents don't want them to wear masks, and teachers who don't have kids wear masks, with parents of kids who want them to wear masks. And I know in our meetings, we talked about the potential of maybe moving classes, and I think that just creates challenge with the relationships that have already been formed, and the division that might create. And I don't know if that's something incredibly to take into consideration, but when we look at the people who, the hundreds of parents who said, if masks aren't required, we'll look into the online option, which we can fully support. But when we think about what's best for the kids, you know, we've known from the beginning, being in the classroom, being in that environment with their peers, their caring and incredible teachers that we have in our district is really what's best for them. I hate to see that. I think the other principals would echo this, of just hating to see those changes made because of this. So it's almost like on March 8th, if this is decided, then we may have some families who decide to just go a different direction, you know, because they don't happen to be in the class with the teacher who's doing the thing that they support. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to share that as kind of a summary of some of the thoughts of the principals just in their conversations with teachers at an elementary level. And just want to share.
Well, the thing that I want to come up this time to talk with you about is one of the things, you know, all obsessed about the math issue. Of course, there's a million other things that help officials and governments to do, right? And I hope we don't lose track of those things in the strong communication to stay home, wash your hands regularly, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, but anyway, I know everybody will do their best, but regardless of what happens tonight, that doesn't change a thing about those other things, right?
I feel like we got so many emails on this issue. It's extremely heated topic and very divisive. I mean, people are on one side or the other. And as I read through their emails, I would be reading, keep the masks because, and then you can fill in the blank. They have millions of reasons to keep the masks. And I read through them and they made sense, you know, made perfect sense. It was like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's such a good reason, and I totally agree. And then I would read the next email, and it was, please get rid of the masks. And they would list off all these reasons to get rid of the masks, and I read through them, and I'm like, you're totally right, totally agree with you. You know, and I felt like that back and forth, the whole time that I was reading these emails. And it's super, super hard decision, because if we vote to get rid of the masks, you've just made all the people mad that want to keep the masks. And if you keep the masks, then you get to make everybody mad. And so with what Scott's recommending, I guess the idea that people can choose.
I'm not saying that that's an easy decision at all, but I can see both sides when I look at those emails, and I read what the parents have to say. I can completely look and see both sides of the issue. And so, I don't know, I think if we allow them the opportunity to choose, those that feel that they need to continue to wear the masks, and I know that there's going to be kids, talked to a bunch of them last night, was with a bunch of kids playing a game of bowling, and they were talking about the mask mandate possibly going away in schools. And the kids, some of them even said, I'll still wear mine because I don't want to be quarantined. One of the girls that was there last night in this group that I was with has been quarantined. She's been quarantined 6 times this year, this school year. And so she said she doesn't care if the mask mandate goes away. She absolutely won't stop wearing her mask because she does not want to be quarantined anymore. And so I think that that's good to give people that choice, but it's definitely a divisive, not an easy issue.
Well, I think that's what makes this thing so hard is the fact that it's still up to 6 feet social distancing. So, I mean, I think everybody would like to throw these masks away and not have to quarantine too. But that's the reality. Is that that's the hiccup is putting those kids back in quarantine. You know, when getting sports events opened up, getting people back in the gyms, or getting our kids out there, they're dancing, they're in the band, they're doing. So it'd be, you know, we'd love to get those masks off, but then you take the masks off and you start working the kids again. Do we see the kids really suffer more when they're quarantined or not? I mean, I guess I'm just asking. He's been quarantined and he has played some of his sports activities, and he's like, I'm gonna wear it just because I'm gonna play my sports stuff. There's no way I'm gonna miss out. So I guess do we see a bigger struggle with kids who are quarantined versus not in the schools?
I think it was a huge challenge for kids last November and December when we had those high numbers of quarantines. They were struggling academically, they were struggling socially. Yeah, there was a huge impact of that. I mean, like I said, masks are not the single variable in kids' social emotional struggles right now. Well, I guess that's what for the last bullet, and that is reward the kids and incentivize the kids to keep wearing masks and say, if you have your mask, you have to quarantine and make their guard themselves.
In a school, the consequence is if somebody's tested by them, then they're going to get quarantined. And they know the consequence going into that, you know, versus if they are going for a mask, then they're not going to have to be quarantined. And the parents know that those are the consequences that they're taking. And the kids know those consequences. And so I think at that point, you just let people govern themselves and let them choose the consequence. I mean, at that point, I don't know what else to do other than let them have their choice and the consequence right there before them, and they can fit.
Amy?
Yeah.
You know, quarantine.
Just come on to the microphone.
My daughter's been quarantined twice, and she told me, I told her, I said, they might lift the mask mandate. How do you feel about that? She said, I'd rather wear a mask than quarantine. She has been behind in a subject that she struggles with, and she goes, and thank heaven for that Monday that they can go and get help, or else she would be completely lost. She has been using those Mondays because she was quarantined, but she still feels like she's lost, and she's a smart kid. It's been very, quarantine has been very difficult on these kids. They feel disconnected from their friends. They feel like almost like they've done something wrong. And so, no, it has not been easy for these kids who have before.
Thank you. I know a couple of mine have been quarantined as well, and some people, they're upset. They have PTSD when the principal walks in with the white slip. I mean, all of them are just like, oh, I was over at Hillcrest and I was just there for a meeting. I wasn't there for anything else. And Principal Miller wanted to show me something in one of the classrooms that they were looking at upgrading, something that they were going to do. He was excited about it. And he opened the door to the classroom, and all the kids just were like, no, and they were freaking out, and I'm standing in the hall like, what the heck? And then I realized they all thought they were going to be killing me when he opened up that door, and I was like, oh, that's so sad. So, no, I understand. My kids have been behind because of quarantine as well, and their grades have dropped, and yeah, it's not fun. So I know that like tons of kids will continue to wear the mask. Personally, I'm including half my own kids. Half said I'm done and half said also wear. So, and
So I've read the emails and did my own unofficial tally, including the comments tonight. So 24 said wearing masks in and of themselves create health problems. There's probably some of that. I don't know how serious that would be. But in my mind, more of an excuse not to wear the mask. But I feel like and keep the masks to keep our kids in school and to keep them continuing in their activities. But I'm not sure I understand what we're proposing. So we're saying effective March 8th. So between now and March 8th, nothing changes. Is that right? That's correct. Okay.
And I'm not just trying to get the kids down the road. I really, we need to give people time to know this, whatever the decision is, and make appropriate adjustments to schedules. That we may have teachers that has to be released from their contract or take leave with their trimester if we don't have masks. There's going to be a lot of details to work through. So, plus the other key point, I actually had another slide on the reasons why to wait till March 8th. As I mentioned earlier, the efficacy of the vaccines will not be fully in effect until March 8th. So 700 of our employees will have that efficacy the week before, but 300, it's literally March 8th is the day. It's 3 weeks from this Monday when that's has full efficacy. So lots of key reasons why I don't believe tomorrow is the day to lift the mask mandate. And again, I personally feel like it's critical. We just watch that trend line, and if I were a gambling man, which after Sunday, I don't think I'll gamble at all. But I personally like we're going to see our rates go back up, and we can easily be above that 15 per 10,000 rate again, which is 20 applications in our district, and it would take it off the table. So I hate to be pessimistic. It just wouldn't surprise me to see those rates pick up higher than we are right now.
Well, I think the logic that we need to wait until the vaccinations are finished in our district makes good sense to me before we make a change. So I'm in favor of the proposal.
And the proposal is, Chad, that they would lift the mask mandate as of March 8th.
Yes. Okay. We can always address that. We can always readdress it.
And let the students and the teachers and the principals and librarians and bus drivers govern themselves.
make those mandates that they feel they need to. And I think our principals would be very supportive of those teachers. Okay, is there any other questions?
Probably commented about the other factors, and I assume those are in our phase one plan to stay open per se.
Yes, yeah.
This is out on the slide.
It's the only, it's one more,
Yeah.
the changes.
Yeah.
And it's just it's a critical change. And the other part is just, the change in definition of who we need to quarantine.
Yeah. Well, I'm conflicted, but I'm probably inclined to vote against it because of the, yes, I appreciate what the administration is saying and their perspective on that. It does feel to me like it puts those who have unique circumstances and feel the need to have the mask requirement continue in a very difficult situation to enforce that. But that's probably where I'm at. I voted yes, I could change those after, but I think that's where I'm at.
One other thing, just I think is probably helpful to address, and I didn't have a specific conversation, but in meetings with other superintendents in Region 6 every 2 weeks, I'm 98% confident that neither Jefferson or Madison has had a true mask mandate in their schools. I think they've encouraged, they've incentivized, so much closer to what we're proposing tonight. Their rates have not been significantly higher than ours. And so, again, I'm not saying that I don't believe in masks, but I think there are things that happen in the school that also impact that. So, it might be helpful bit of information to help weigh the risks versus benefits.
So is anybody willing to make a motion one way or the other?
So, can we just read through this stuff?
Sure.
Would you like to?
Is it different than what I have on the slide, Chad?
No, but I just want to think through it.
Sure. So I'll read what's on the slide. I think I didn't copy it verbatim, so if you notice anything different that I'm leaving out, please let me know. So the recommendation from the superintendent and district leadership is that effective March 8th, that the school board would move all schools back to phase 1 of the reopening plan with the following changes. Unless the average exceeds 15 per 10,000 3 consecutive days. Staff and students will be strongly, bus drivers, teachers, coaches, advisors of extracurricular activities, and school principals would be authorized to require masks in their respective buses, offices, and activities in designated areas of the school. We require organizers to call that is school activity or school activity. Solution. And see if I have any critical differences.
I move that we accept the recommendation of the administration. Statement.
All right, there's been a motion made to accept the district administration's revision plan, I guess revisions to phase 1. So is there a second? All right, so Mr. Lynch has seconded the motion, so this is open for discussion. So,
I think the last thing I would say is this feel that it is too much like the guy who's about to win the race that raises his hand in there before the finish line. But I certainly say that with some humility because I don't mean that like you're crazy if you don't agree with me, I don't even that, I'm just saying that's what I worry about. We've struck a very, what I think has been, and I say we don't know in the administration, has struck the right balance throughout the year with parents and teachers and people with unique circumstances of health, etc. I just think it's the wrong time to change. I certainly understand the arguments for changing, and I say what I say, but you know, the good bad things you all make much more right than me.
So, Greg, you're suggesting that we not let the mandate go.
Right. Okay, maybe the way it is, with the individual teachers and stuff, et cetera, still have the authority to allow students to move them out. And make it appropriate and helpful to the education setting, but it just looks for money.
Any other discussion?
I don't know if it's helpful, but if you did listen to the public health board meeting, when they looked at this, it was the exact same discussion, feelings and stress of, and honestly, your comments remind me of exactly what they said. So they felt that it was the right to look at that for the county.
But I take comfort we're going to marching for people to receive the vaccines and hopefully can get us to that. Hey, Scott, thanks for that.
Don't ask Amy.
Anytime.
You are welcome to come up and back.
Either way, but maybe just a couple points of I want you to know as administrative teams, we would support however this plays out. Definitely not going to. One question I might would pose or think about if we are on the fence, does this decision have to be made tonight? And the reason I throw that out there is when we start looking at that social emotional piece of our kids and our staff members, which is going to be helpful to throw carrot out. There's an end to this that we then turn around and say our members back up and I don't know if there's an opportunity, but I just feel that to consider if it's possible, because I'm concerned. As much as I would love to be able to see kids' faces and help them through that, is it more detrimental to let them see an end in sight and move their cheese, as it were, again in 2 or 3 weeks when our numbers go back up and also it changes? I don't know that it changes what we do tonight, but those are something I just want to be clarified. We will support whatever is decided. If we flip language, or it's not that we're unwilling, we fought the fight this long, but I do worry in talking with staff members and kids of that cathartic release of this is over, to turn around and say, no, it's not. So whatever that's worth.
I think one of the things we want to see is there are patrons who know what the health district has done, and so they're not going to send their kids to school with masks starting tomorrow. I think we're going to see that. Because they'll be exercising their agency, and that's how strongly some people feel about it. So some people are not going to wait so much.
They're already operating, like there's people that are already sending their kids with no masks. And that's why the principals are having a hard time.
Right.
Because there's such polar opposite youth on this, you know. And it's really hard, I think, to be constantly disciplining a kid who's a great kid, and you know, they're not in trouble, but yet they're not coming to school for math, and so it turns them into a negative for those kids. It's just really hard. With that being said, I do realize how hard it's going to be if our numbers go up and we have to go back. However, I really feel like we need to give people the option of what they're going to do. But I mean, if everybody disagrees with me, I'm not going to cry myself to sleep over it either. I mean, because we've been wearing for so long, I personally, I've been wearing them since we started all this, so it's not going to harm me personally if everybody wants to live. It doesn't matter, and my kids will go along with it, but there are going to be those that don't. That's why I think if we make it open, that's kind of both ways.
Like I say, kind of reflecting on Greg's comments earlier, I'm reminded of a comment that James Corbett from Public Health made sometime last summer. And that was, in his opinion, and I hope it hasn't changed over the last few months, but he said that the very best thing we can do to stop the spread of COVID is to stay home when you're symptomatic. And if people would just do that, we really wouldn't have to wear masks, we wouldn't have to take these other precautions. And so it may be that this is enough of an incentive to say the only way we can do this is by those rates staying low, and the way the rates are going to stay low is if you're keeping your kids home when they're sick. And if you send them when they're sick, those rates are going to go up. We could just really message that and keep that going. I think it would actually be more to stop the spread than currently. And that's the case.
I totally agree with that. Again, whatever decision we make, I have to totally continue to strongly emphasize that. Yeah, I'm watching these other things. Yeah, math is just one of the 10 or however many different factors there are in being smart about this thing. So I don't have anything else to say about this next. But I understand that attendance at athletic events that doesn't change. That's already,
right.
I mean, it's still 40% of capacity.
Well, if you would ask me at 9 o'clock this morning, I would say absolutely yes, but honestly, I may have to spend some time really looking at that. It's a little bit confusing is what I'll say, because we have now a health guidance from the state that I assumed was a health order, but it's not. The reference is a plan that's created by the state board, but it has never been approved by the actual state board. It's been created by their executive director and their chair. So I'm really at a loss as to what our responsibilities are with that. But we're now, the best answer is to say we're going to stick at 40%.
We're not voting on that issue.
No.
We're just voting on.
Yes, just on this.
Okay.
All right, you guys ready? We've got a motion in a second.
Yeah.
Unless there is, I guess, another motion that needs to be made. So, all right, we can go. So, all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So it's 3-1, and Paula's not here. So motion carries. So the plan has been adopted for the district proposed. So that will go into effect May. Pending the rate. Yeah. Pending that rate. March 8th. Sorry, thank you. Thank you. I've been sitting up there way too long. All right.
Two more things on the agenda here. So first of all, we're going to go over some proposed policies for 30-day review. So Dr. Wilson.
So last week we gave you a policy for initial consideration, which is a revised public complaint and uniform grievance policy. The purpose of this was to synthesize what had been for the last at least 20 years two independent policies and simply create one policy and procedure so that both our patrons and our principals and teachers know how those complaints should be resolved. The feedback I received from Lisa Puckett from Formal Education Association is that she reviewed that and she was supportive with those changes. So with that, we submit that to board for that to put out for 30-day review by the public.
All right, and that does require a motion. So
The feedback came from where?
From Lisa Puckett with the Formal Education Association. Yes.
So I move that we, put out the proposed policy for the review.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Calder, seconded by Mr. Dance. Is there any discussion on those policies? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries. And the last item on the agenda is the proposed policy for deletion. And that is for Keith Jackson.
So the policy in three locations, as we're looking at those policies specifically mentioned are deleted. The policy in and of itself, whereas we will still require mandate background checks and these same things for volunteers who come into our schools. We'll just remove the other two locations and keep it only in the personnel section.
Makes sense. All right, do we have a motion to remove those policies, or I guess delete policies?
We would pass that motion tonight, we can delete it immediately, so to speak, there's no public comment and
The policy is still there. We just have this long-standing practice of creating duplicate policies in different sections. And there's probably more efficient ways to accomplish that purpose.
So Mr. Calder has moved to go ahead and delete those policies. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Dan. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Okay, for the upcoming agenda items, talking about that policy on open enrollment. Scott, do you know that you would like to put that on?
So Mary, our next work session includes school board reports from which school?
PCHS and ELHS.
Okay, Amy answered it for me. So we'll have that, and we'll have some discussion about our information to go to patrons for the supplemental levy. I would think that the discussion of the open enrollment will probably at least 15 minutes to 30 minutes of a work session. The board's scheduled to work with that. I'm not supposed to be on that work session.
I think for
For
now,
the supplemental, we can do that as well.
I think for now we can put it there.
Yeah, with a 3-month turnaround time from initial consideration to 30-day review and adoption. It's not a lot of time.
Yeah.
So,
But we would at least have 1 month.
yeah.
And I know for a teacher, she's in, a teacher is typically going to try to make that decision now, do I need to move and start looking for positions?
Yeah.
Well, I think let's put it on the work session on February 24th. And we'll just try really hard to keep it.
So that's great.
We'll just try and keep that agenda fairly clear.
Madam Chair,
I've been with, Guy on 2 occasions, and on both occasions we had Eric from, Untitled Chapter on the phone and talking to us about refinancing bonds, and I had some questions, so I approached Guy about those questions, and we got Eric on the phone, and he provided some really good information. It's a complicated issue, in my mind, and so I've been trying to understand it. And so our last discussion with Eric, in my mind, led some credence to going back to that defeasance principle. And maybe that would be better for the district and save the district more interest. Still taking advantage of the low rates, but not necessarily pulling the trigger on refinance now. Because rates continue to stay low. Economists indicate they will be low, at least for the next foreseeable future, maybe the next year. But we've got to do something with that money that we've got in savings before September. And if we choose not to do a refinance, we could implement that defeasance. I'm not saying it right, Guy, but that principle, so that we could, because if we leave that money there and do nothing, then we're going to find ourselves do the I want to have that discussion, we're prepared to make a decision on those issues within the next 2-3 months. So I'd like to have that on the agenda, maybe for the March board meeting, guys, what you and I talked about.
Is that something that we would want in the regular meeting or in the work session?
I think the work session in March would be best, and then we know the outcome of the supplemental on facilities levy.
Yeah, we want to know the outcome of that. That's a much better
idea about the.
Yeah, right. Because that may change our thinking as well.
On my draft agenda for the next February 24th meeting, I have the bond refinance here. Being got
Do we want to have this stuff?
You have the full name,
Do we want to move that to March?
Well, I think the work session of you guys, March session. Yeah, March work session, Eric.
Move it to the March work session and then have that policy on open enrollment in February. Yeah. All right, is there any other agenda items that we need to be putting on throughout the meetings? Okay. Anything from administration that needs to go on? Okay. All right, I'm sure we'll think of more stuff, so whenever we have it. We need a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Moved by Mr. Dan, seconded by Mr. Calder. Is there any discussion on adjourning? All in favor? Aye. Okay, motion carries. Meeting adjourned.
Yeah, we get that, we usually get money from states. We have to have the whole district else. So, with pocket. But I think it's has nothing to do with that.
Right, well, okay, right. We've also got Trustees.
Backwards. Yeah.
So that's the.
Yeah. So we staff at about, for every 400 kids, we staff one principal typically, and they're right at 1,600. So that's why we've got 3 assistants instead of 2 like the other 2 high schools.
Then you gotta get it.
The post for the director.